Hey, welcome back to Business 163, Personal Finance, and we are now starting out module number 6. Module number 6 on spending. Spending, of course, is sort of a logical place to go right after we finish our module number 5 on budgeting, right? Because obviously in budgeting you are setting up a plan, and one of the things that has to practically happen is aligning your plan with your actual life. And when we talk about personal finance, we talk about budgeted versus what we're actually spending and what we'd like to be spending in particular areas. So, our very first video in module number 6, as you can see, is entitled Value and Spending. Value and Spending. And so, let's take a look at this and see if we can really introduce this module for you well. So, we've just finished up Module 5 on budgeting, and as you can see in the first bullet point, in almost every budgeting process, we begin with our income, typically our after-tax take-home income, and then we figure out how much goes into what big categories, right? And so, whether you're using the 50-30-20 plan or the envelope method or some hybrid combining different elements of the different methods that we've outlined for you in module number 5, we trust that by now, as we're starting module 6, we pretty much have figured out what our incoming revenue, our income is, and we've made an attempt at trying to figure out how much of our income should go towards spending in particular categories, whether those are fixed expenses, housing, transportation, food, clothing, entertainment, right? All those kinds of things, right? But as you see in the second bullet point, the challenge in the real world is then keeping our spending within that designated amount that we calculated when we prepared our budget, right? It's one thing to create a budget. It's another for our budget on paper to be confronted with, well, how we're actually spending our money and how we'd like to spend our money. When we're able to do that, we have accomplished the main thing in personal finance. You see the title of this slide. The main thing is what? Living within your means. And we do need to say that living within our means is very much a relative thing. Let me give you an example. Here is a number, $40,000. Let's say that you have person A and person B. Both of them spend $40,000 a year. However, even though that amount is objectively the same, relatively speaking, we're talking about two very different situations. Why is that? Because person A makes $60,000 a year. Person B makes $30,000 a year. What ends up happening here? The person who makes $60,000 a year and spends $40,000 in that same year has saved $20,000. The person who only makes $30,000 a year and yet spends $40,000 that same year has gone into debt for an additional $10,000. You see, the dollar amount only makes sense within the context. Are we living within our means? So, returning to the slide deck, the struggle, as you can see, for anyone who lives with a budget is when we're confronted with budget versus what we're already spending, or budget versus, well, that purchase that we're tempted to make. And how do we make that happen? Well, then there's credit. There's consumer credit, or you get an auto loan, or you get a loan for whatever the purchase price is, right? That's the real practical struggle, which is why we have this entire module on spending to begin with. The guiding principle here is not necessarily to say this number is the number. No, rather, the guiding principle we want to suggest in Module 6 is the pursuit of value, right? And so what is value? Value is defined in economics as the measure of the benefit received by a good or service. In fact, in economics, value is measured in units of currency, just so that it's translatable from one product to another. And the whole idea here is answering the question, what is the maximum amount of money I am willing and able to pay for this good or service? How much am I willing to pay for this? What's the real value to me in dollars and cents, and am I willing to pay that amount, to forego having that amount in my pocket, in savings, in wherever else, right, to spend on something else? Am I willing to spend that money for this good or service? That's the value that we assign. And of course, the value varies from person to person. And quite frankly, the value will vary for each of us as individuals depending on the circumstance we're in, right? Think about it. When you're enduring a 120-degree day outside and you just finished running 3 blocks, what is the value you place on a cold bottle of water? Well, admittedly, the value is going to be different than that same bottle of water on a 42-degree day in San Francisco, right, when you're chilled to the bone. The value is different depending on the situation and the context. But still, even that being said, the whole idea here when we begin this Module 6 on spending is to search for the best value. Now, contrary to what some of you may be thinking when you hear that, the best value is not always simply the cheapest purchase price. It's not always the cheapest price tag. Sometimes the best quality is found in the most expensive option. There is the old saying, right? Buy the best, you only have to buy it once. Sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's not. One of the things we have to also account for is the long-term overall cost of ownership. What is the long-term overall cost of owning a gym membership? We'll see that in a supplemental video, that discussion. How often are we really going to go? What's really statistical data suggest in terms of folks who sign up for relatively expensive gym memberships? Or, what's the long-term overall cost of owning a home? Certainly, owning your home is, well, part of the durable American dream, and yet you also have to account for the fact not only do you have to make the mortgage payment, you're going to have to buy homeowner's insurance. You're going to have to repair stuff when it breaks, whether that's plumbing or electrical or replacing a roof or, well, all sorts of things that, well, quite frankly, if you own the home, there's no landlord to call when something breaks. You're going to have to fix it yourself on your dime. And perhaps this is nowhere more true, considering the long-term overall cost of ownership, than when it comes to cars. What is the long-term overall cost of owning perhaps that luxury German automobile versus that relatively economical Japanese sedan? You will find that over the long-term haul of owning that automobile, there are stark differences in the overall cost of ownership. And really, as we kick off Module 6, this is what we are talking about. The ongoing pursuit and trying to educate ourselves to be able to ascertain and identify the real value, not only the short-term, but the long-term value of the choices we make in spending our money. All of this under the umbrella of aligning our actual behavior with our desired behavior that we've already written down when we created our personal budget. Hope that's helpful. I'm looking forward to this module. I hope you are too. We'll see you in the next video.